I look at that central Delhi, which is NDMC area, the New Delhi area. I think we need to look at that very differently. It's definitely very low rise. It was built low rise. It was built as the garden city with lots of green. Today, it functions as a sort of green lung for the whole city. People who are working in these buildings, so how do they react to the light streaming in from their windows? I don't know what it is like for them.
In India, as in many other countries, urbanization is putting a lot of pressure on governments. Lot many high rises are being built, which means that old buildings are being raised and traditional markets are also being, demolished. So today we are going to talk about how Delhi is changing its face, its history. And now I'm joined by Swapna Liddle, who is known for her research of history of Delhi. She's an architecture, or she's a lover of architecture and buildings. She also has curated many walks and is also associated with INTACT, that is India National Trust for Arts and Culture. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for speaking to Indian Express. Ma'am, what do you have to say about the new skyline of Delhi? It's changing drastically.
Well, yes, of course, it is changing. What is special about Delhi is that Delhi, unlike a lot of other cities of that size, for a long time has been fairly low rise. And there's a historical reason for that, because, when New Delhi was built in the early 20th century. As the capital that the British built in Delhi. And the idea behind that design of that capital was to make it a garden city. So lots of trees, low rise buildings, broad roads, tree-lined roads, lots of open spaces, lots of parks, lots of greenery. So that was the model, and that model really became the model for even buildings that were, even areas that were developed after that. So even post-independence, when you see new colonies coming up, they all have that same ideal of the low-rise, lots of green model. Now that in the last few years, we have been seeing that is changing. That's putting a lot more high-rise buildings, lot more density of population within that same space. So that definitely is a change that is happening. It is having lots of impact, and it will continue to have impact on, I think, on our urban life.
What about, open spaces? You've also written a book about, walks. You and your sister have written a book, rather. I was reading about it, about...
On the gardens of Delhi.
Yes, gardens of Delhi. Beautiful. I was also reading some expert from there saying in Nehru Garden, Ullu ka ped. So, so please tell us about these open spaces and your love for open spaces, as you rightly mentioned, that open spaces are diminishing.
So Delhi is lucky to have a lot of very interesting, some of them very historic gardens also, but also gardens that have been built more recently. And those gardens definitely, they have their own history. They have the beauty of the green space, the beauty, some of them of, there are places where you can see the actual older trees of Delhi, the native species also. So all of this, I think, apart, even if you're not interested in the historical aspects of them, or you're not very knowledgeable about the horticulture of them, even if you don't have all that interest, it just makes your urban life so much better. We often live in very crowded circumstances. Most of the people in the city live in places where they don't have any green area of their own. They will not even have probably space to keep a few plants around their house. But if they can get away from time to time to these nice gardens, maybe even not just a bigger park, but maybe even smaller gardens in their own neighborhood, that really enhances the quality of life that you have. a city.
Absolutely. Even in North Block, South Block, like even around Parliament, those are heritage trees. Some are like really old. So when
Yeah.
this construction was taking place, Central Vista, so lot many
Yes.
were either replanted or, some were, they were taken out. So what do you have to say about this restructuring of this Central Vista? Some of the jamun trees were also, uprooted from their areas, and the kind of weather we also see, the kind of winds we also see these days, most of the trees, they just fall because there is no upkeep for them. There is no though the government claims there has been geotagging, but trees do suffer because of this constant concretization of areas.
Yeah, definitely. Many aspects are involved there. One is the kind of neglect that you talk about, which is that if you're just geotagging and not really seeing, assessing periodically the health of the trees to see what problems the tree might be facing, is it secure, is it safe, are its roots firm, are they getting choked by concrete? All those assessments, unless we are actually doing an assessment of the health of every tree, we are not we are being negligent, and so it is either negligence or cutting down trees in order for to do new construction, etc. Uh, the problem then arises that even if in place of those old trees that have been lost, even if we plant new trees, it's not good enough, because it's the big mature trees that really make that difference. It takes a very long time for a tree to grow to
Grow up.
that
Yeah.
level. So therefore, just by saying that, okay, we will now plant other trees in to replace this is not good enough, and replanting also has to be a long-term plan, not just कि हमने इतने पेड़ काट दिए, now we can try and add further trees. So that is a very, very important question. And when we're talking about Central Vista, I look at that central Delhi, which is the NDMC area, the New Delhi area. I think we need to look at that very differently. It's definitely very low rise. It was built low rise. It was built as the garden city with lots of green. Today, it functions as a sort of green lung for the whole city. And we mustn't forget that if we get rid of that green lung, it's not going to affect only that area, but it's going to affect the rest of the city also. So we should not be cutting down more trees in that area at all, because it is dangerous. It already, we live in a city that is really polluted,
Yes.
congested. So we have to do the best that we can to preserve what we have.
Coming back to buildings and the architecture, North Block and South Block, which housed Ministry of Home Affairs, Finance, Defense, even the Prime Minister's office, now they are going to be shifted gradually. In next to 2 to 3 months, they're going to be shifted gradually. So what do you make of it? Is it a good move by the government, or how do you view it?
If you look at and this is my personal view as as somebody who is involved in history, I am no longer with Intac either.
I know.
I'm an advisor, but I'm
Yes.
not officially with Intac. This is entirely my
Opinion.
personal
Yeah.
view, which is that this is historical development, and we must remember that history, first of all of our history is our history. And particularly this period of the making of New Delhi, I always keep reminding people that this is a history which is the history of the Indian national movement also. This is the history of a period when the British in India they felt so pressured by the national movement that they decided that they have to move the capital from Calcutta to Delhi, because a lot of Indians felt that Delhi was the true capital. Because for many centuries earlier, Delhi had been the capital. So the British, in order to respond to the national movement, to give in to some of the demands of the national movement, decided that they would move the capital to Delhi. And in Delhi, you must remember that when they built these buildings, whether it is Government House, which we call Rashtrapati Bhavan now, or it's the Secretariat blocks, or it is even Parliament, they were responding to Indian sentiments. If you look at the colors that are used, the stone that is used, the sandstone, which is like Indian. A lot of Indian monumental buildings are also made of that sandstone, right? So that, whether it was adding that or it was the architecture that was used. Look at the Sachi Stupa, which is the model of Rashtrapati Bhavan's dome, right? Or the chhajjas and chhatris and jalis which they make there. So it is, I don't look at it as colonial architecture. I look at it as a response to the Indian colonial Indian anti-colonial movement that you see reflected in that. In fact, a lot of, so that has, and particularly Parliament, for instance, the old Parliament is where our national movement really gets codified into the constitution. A lot of that development happens in that area. So these are all buildings which have had, and its colonial history was only from the late 1920s to 47. In fact, from 47 onwards, all of independent India's history, administrative history, history of government, history of parliament, has all been in these sites. So in fact, this has a much longer, this is a history of independent India rather than a colonial history. So, when we think that we will remove these things from there, what are we doing? Are we really getting rid of the post-independence history of our capital city rather than erasing colonial history? Colonial history is a very small part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And ma'am, many old timers say the kind of light show which has been put on both in North Block and South Block is quite jarring. So, as a person who loves arts and history and architecture, what do you have to say about that? That the new light show, in the evening hours, those lights which are that light show which is going on in North Block and South Block, even all the other buildings also.
Yeah. Well, I am of a generation which used to remember that, the lights that used to be put on earlier, which used to look like diyas. And they were also there for a very short while. They used to be there only for,
3 days,
say, the, Republic Day beating, up till the beating of the retreat, they used to be done. And it was a special event. It was a special feature because I think it was felt that these were working buildings. These were places which were office buildings. These were so it was not as if they should be lit up every day. So that used to be a tradition. These buildings, I mean, it is a matter of taste to see whether you like these bright lights or not. I just wonder as to the people who are working in these buildings, so how do they react to the light streaming in from their windows? I don't know what it is like for them.
And if you see the new buildings which are coming up in Delhi, especially, most, are of concrete and they look very ugly from outside. Maybe it's their upkeep or, the way they are built. Within 1 or 2 years, they start deteriorating. So, what do you, what are your views? Like when you see Sarojini Nagar, Naroji Nagar, even Ames, all these official complexes also which are coming up. Naroji Nagar now has big complexes now, like the entire skyline has changed and it's all commercialized, I feel.
Yeah. I think of that redevelopment, the thing of concern is that it is the flats that you are mentioning. Those have increased the density to alarming levels. A lot of trees were cut down for that. And that is very, very, the density of population there is so high that it puts an enormous stress on the infrastructure and, of course, on quality of life. I think that is very adversely affected. As for the office buildings in Central Vista, my issue is not so much with the architecture. I mean, you can debate whether or not you like the architecture or don't like the architecture. My problem is that we have in the process erased a era of our architecture, which we should have had some, at least some signs of that architecture should have been left, like the post-independence period. Some of that should be, I think, should be preserved. We have to have from each era of our history, we need to have some signs at least. So that is one. And of course, it sort of like bringing so much more government into that area changes the character of it to some extent. Government offices come with security, come with all sorts of issues there, which are probably not quite so good.
What about Red Fort and what about Bhagirat Palace? I was reading your views on it. Can you share them with us?
Uh, you know, I think
Chandni
we will
Chowk.
have to think we'll have to think very closely, very carefully about what is happening to Chandni Chowk. Shahjahanabad, it's a historic town. It has a street plan and it has some building conventions which are very particular. You know, you cannot treat an area like that like you treat the rest of Delhi. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. The street plan is a narrow plan. You know, very narrow streets are there. That's because it was built in a time when everybody walked everywhere, right? That's understood. Also, so there is not a lot of open space outside the houses, but the open space is inside the houses, inside the courtyards, the angan. The angan is a very important part of the construction over there. Every time I see that an old building is demolished, in place of it comes up one solid block of construction. So you are coming to a situation where there is no angan, which would used to be the open place. You've finished that open place. And outside also there is no open place, because outside the houses, there's no kind of gap between the houses. There is no gap between the road and the house. So you are getting a very unplanned development. You have to have development there which is suitable and in keeping with the historic character. And of course, one thing that I feel very sad about is that what we are doing is, you had these historic markets, Dariba Kalan, Kinari Bazaar, all of these old historic markets, which for centuries, small shopkeepers have had their shops there. Now they have to compete against the malls that are coming up. So I think developing a mall in that area is not a very wise thing to do.
What about Red Fort? No, there again, there is a sound and light show. The opposition claims that the government redefined history to a certain extent in that sound and light show. You have been witnessing, many things. What are your views on that?
I haven't, to be very frank, I haven't seen the Sound and Light show. I don't know what it's about. I have seen the Interpretation Center, which I think is quite good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Interpretation Center. At least when I saw it on its inauguration, it is not bad at all. So I don't have very much to say about the Sound and Light show here.
The last question, ma'am. I was also reading somewhere that you said that many cities worldwide have built their economies around their history. So can you elaborate on that?
I think that is very, very important. I was giving the example of the Chandni Chowk area, Shahjahanabad. There are cities, think of cities like Venice, for instance. People come there not for monuments. They come to absorb the character of the place, all the historic buildings. Many of the historic buildings are either hotels or they are restaurants, they are shops, those kind of things. Shahjahanabad, just Old Delhi itself has more than 700 listed buildings. These are buildings which are historic. They have their historic architecture that is still there. Why do we think that even if we have to have a sari shop, that sari shop has to work out of a steel and glass showroom? Why can it not work out of a historic haveli? So I think we don't have that vision. And I think it is very unfair to blame the owners of those buildings for not having that vision. I think we, as experts, as authorities, have to make it convenient for people to do that. Make the regulations easier, make the fiscal structures easier. You can today get a loan to build a new house. You don't get a loan to renovate a 100-year-old, 200-year-old Haveli. You should be able to get an easy loan to rebuild that. I think if our authorities, our municipal authorities, our state, central, whatever level that this is required, if you create the right atmosphere and climate for meaningful, sustainable restoration and revitalization. Revitalization doesn't mean redevelopment, that you break everything down and build something new there, but revitalization of that existing infrastructure. Revitalize it, upgrade it, and then you will be able to benefit from the tremendous asset that heritage is, to be able to bring a lot of tourism and local livelihoods, business, all of that will come to the historic structures.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for speaking to Indian Express and sharing your thoughts about architecture and also your love for open spaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.